Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast, a weekly podcast in which we take the time to think. I'm Ivanka Magic.
My name's Michael Forrest. We're trying to understand things as well. I tell you, every conversation we have goes into my vault of usefulness. You know, whether or not this is making any cash, it's certainly like, you know, that song wouldn't have got made probably if I hadn't had a conversation that I would have felt hypocritical about that enough that I dragged myself out of bed at 3 a.m. to go and record a melody into my phone. The more lenses I can put on the world through our conversations, the better. And hopefully the listener benefits from that to some extent too. This week is part 2 of our fake news conversation. We just ended up talking about it for ages, so we thought we'd be kind to ourselves and break it into 2 parts.
And have a week off. Yes.
Because I'm on holiday next week, that's why we're doing a double record. So I'm going to holiday, I'm going to Oslo. Anyway, let's get the episode started, shall we? Fake news part 2. We talked about lots of digital, how we're going to deal with this apocalyptic future that we're faced with. So let's get into that episode now as we retrospectively record an intro to it. So, in this part 2 of this episode, you got any more, let's have a bit of chit-chat, shall we?
Yeah,
I saved up a couple of stories from earlier, but how are you?
Loads of stories.
Loads. How are you, Ivanka?
I am excellent.
More depressed than you were 2 hours ago.
The roller coaster ride that was recording a double episode did make me very depressed, but then it lifted me back up again. And now I couldn't possibly pick another topic, but I can tell you about my week,
do it.
Which is involved. So the plus side of being forced to go to Zag-Reb for the purposes of bureaucracy meant that I was on the mainland with my van, which has space in it for plants.
Ooh.
So I was able to go, because we do have a garden centre on the island here, but it's very small and it's all very limited choice. So I went to Split, which is a large port city on the coast of Croatia, and I went to their garden centre and I bought a lime, 2 lemon trees, a tangerine tree, a bougainvillea.
Trees?
Trees.
Wow.
We've been planting trees in our garden. And
so it's not just going to be the loquats anymore. You're introducing
No.
diversity into your environment.
News.
What?
We chopped down one of the 3 loquats.
Holy crap.
Gone. It was quite a traumatic thing. We've been cutting it, and then we decided to get rid of it. But actually, as our wonderful daughter pointed out, we have more fresh air in our garden now. That was her interpretation
She doesn't
of
know
it.
how fresh air works. Don't you know the trees make the air fresh?
Because it's opened it out much more, and there's much more blue sky and fresh air now that the tree isn't in the way. But we've put on that spot a lime tree.
Okay.
And the man in the garden centre, he said, I can't imagine what people use limes for other than cocktails. And I said, Mexican cooking. He went, oh yes, you've got a point there. So I bought some trees, some bougainvilleas, lots of lavender and rosemary.
I'm very jealous of the, I had this, this came up in a conversation with a billionaire's son in a restaurant recently, but he was talking about his grounds, his estate, and I was like, do you know, I'd love if I had fruit trees and I could pick my breakfast fruit. If I could just have fruit from my trees, I'd love that. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, we have to plant things that are low maintenance. Hence, I have loads of pomegranates and citrus fruit are quite capable of looking after themselves. The loquats, bizarrely, are actually quite sensitive little flowers, more massive trees. But this year, the frost killed. We had no fruit on them this year. This is the fickleness of that nature thing.
Donald Trump, apocalypse. No loquats.
No loquats this year.
Explain that.
It actually snowed on the island,
right,
which is blown everyone's mind this winter. But anyway, it was so grapevines require some. You do need to look after them. You need to be there at the right time to prune them and all that stuff. And we've planted lavender and rosemary primarily because, again, they're native, so they can survive it when it gets a bit dry and hot. And also, they smell nice, and maybe it'll put off a few mosquitoes. I live in
How
hope.
it works.
I don't know.
I know nothing about this. We've got a front garden that I did uproot all those plants and stuff. It grew back. We did it again a couple of weeks ago. But like, we need to really like think about what we actually want it to look like and go to a garden centre and choose some stuff. And I'm just like, so, it feels like I'm looking forward to the day that we manage to do that, because I do enjoy coming out and it's nice and neat looking. But I think we should choose some stuff.
I have to say that rosemary works quite well in Brighton as well.
Rosemary's
really seems to be really hardy. It's evergreen. It smells nice. The bees like it. It's got lots of
I like a bit
pluses.
of rosemary. I'd love to just have a
and
herb garden, but I don't know what would be mucking about with that in our street.
Wow.
There was a croissant on our little flower bed yesterday. And a couple of days before that, a dirty rat trap. Like a sticky feet rat thing someone had chucked in the garden. So we were just like, what is this? Why would you do this? So we've got that sort of problem in our front garden.
Yeah, we don't have that problem. We have lots and lots of insects.
Right.
Lots
Don't
of
like the
insects.
insects.
And we even had 2 snakes. And while my sister was here, an eagle owl landed in the garden.
Was it an eagle or an owl?
It's an eagle owl.
What
That's
the
what it's
hell?
called. It's a really big owl.
I don't believe you.
But
I don't believe that such a thing as an eagle owl
you
exists.
can Wikipedia it.
I refuse.
It'll be the truth because it's on Wikipedia.
Eagle owl cherry.
So how is your week, Michael?
I got some story. So here's Michael's rant about something stupid.
I can see why you make music, Michael.
Michael's rant about something stupid. Coming up.
Nice.
Customer service has got much easier to get hold of now. So I get some rotten apple crisps. I tweet a picture of them, and the company that makes them immediately gets back to me and goes, "Oh, we're so sorry to see that you had these rotten crisps." And then they say, "Let us make it up to you by sending you another packet of these crisps." And I say to myself, I don't like them anymore. They're rotten. Don't just try and give me more of the stuff that I don't like. Similarly, my rear bike light had this bit of rubber on it with some little ladder rungs on it that you pull it round your back, shaft thing. And it's split along it. I've used it at every width now, and it's split every time. And the other day, the last one split, with my Keep Cup rubber inside it. That fell off my bike when I was on the road and I had to go back and find it. And so I submitted an Amazon review saying this product, the rubber used is not fit for purpose. It is snapped. Like, I've put a picture up, and then immediately got like a reply from the company saying, "Oh, give us your address so that we can send you a replacement." And I was just like, well, I need to see institutional change. I need to see promises. I've just seen that your current systems and ways of producing your products are unsatisfactory. So I just don't want the product anymore, do I? It's not enough just to send me a replacement. Why is that the go-to? This is a first world entitlement thing, but it's also a comment on the lowering of standards. I read a very good blog post many years ago at the dawn of blogs saying the word standard, I may have said it on this podcast already, standards used to be you work to a high standard, you do it the best you can do it. Now standard means what is the minimum level of quality we can get away with and ship something. And it is sort of the opposite of what it should mean. So I need to know that you're raising your standards. Don't just send me more of your horrible products.
I mean, if it included we've become aware of this problem and we have addressed it, so we're going to send you the new version of the thing.
Exactly. That's what I'm after. That's what I want from these companies next time. So, it's good that you're responding to me when I'm just passive-aggressively saying stuff about you on the internet.
Though, to be fair, sometimes things just aren't quite right. You get a batch or you get a percentage of things that are, even though 99% of the time they are good,
So tell
You
me
get
that
occasional
this,
product
it
failures.
was this batch was bad. Tell me that, but it looks like you bought this rubber, which has got some sort of weakness along the middle that means
now
that
you're
it
gonna send me more of
functionally
it.
doesn't work. It just doesn't work as a product. I was watching some sort of technical YouTube video, and someone said it was maybe like a game engine. Oh, I could talk about my game thing. Someone said something about people being able to do stuff at opposite ends of the globe. Or flat Earth, depending on your views.
Did they say that?
Yeah, they said that in this thing. I was like, why would you? I mean, if it was a joke,
Now
this
is
was
not the time to be making
it was-
jokes like that.
Now was not the time, and it was just you are the driest. You have the driest sense of humour in history, which there was no evidence of in any other part of this video. So please don't say that sort of thing. Or flat Earth, depending on your views. No, some things are not about belief. Some things are about truth. Truth does exist.
It does.
The only thing in debate is our access to it. But let's not get crazy.
No.
The thing I did last weekend, which was why I was a bit late with the podcast edit, I did the Game Maker's Toolkit, Game Jam, which I'd sort of paid attention to last year. And so what happens is so it's a website called itch.io where you can set up these game jams. And they post the brief up, and then you have 48 hours to kind of upload a game that you've made that answers that brief. And last year it was reusing the same mechanic for multiple purposes. So you shoot, but you move by shooting as well, like dual purpose mechanics.
Okay.
And I thought, right, I've been sort of vaguely thinking I might like to make a game. So I might just, this is a time boxed thing. Let's just dedicate a weekend. Maybe I do a sleepless one, maybe I don't. In the end, I don't think that was really needed. But, well, I mean, maybe it was. But so the brief came through, and the brief was it's a genre game without one mechanic that usually defines that genre. So I had to think about it. I talked to Sharon, but I don't think I had a particularly good idea, but I had a few little thoughts. It was quite a hard one to answer, but then in the end I thought it might be quite funny. I had an idea for a game called Text and Drive, which was, I thought it could be quite funny to have a driving game where you don't look out the window, you're just looking at your phone the whole time. You just hear all the carnage that you're causing. I thought that'd be quite fun. And then I just ended up wrestling with, because I'm sort of like a little bit allergic to things like Unity, like game engines. I'd rather sort of roll my own thing. But I was like, well, I should try Unity. It's good enough for some of these great games that have come out recently. I'll give it a go. But then I ended up I sort of managed to bootstrap a driving game pretty quickly, but then I couldn't get the Mono developed thing to work. I'm quite impressed with how Mono seems to really have taken over cross-platform development. It's what drives Unity. Anyway, I just couldn't get the mono-developed thing to work in the end properly. I ended up rebuilding it from scratch, and it worked a lot better, but then I hardly had any time. But it just kind of ended up feeling like a game where you're just looking at a portion of the screen and kind of driving around based on a thing. So I don't think it would have been good. But I had to accept defeat on it as well. In the end, I was like, this is too much. I'm not going to do it. But I think it was good. It was a good learning experience in terms of okay, how much has got to be done? What is a reasonable sized challenge? And then I was watching all the videos of some of the stuff other people had done in the time. And I was feeling a bit kind of self-conscious that some of the winners, some of the top ones last year were quite polished looking. I was like, how is that even possible? But I think maybe it was, don't attempt it alone again, or at least be a bit more prepared next time. Make sure that your development environment actually works. But I didn't know what. I didn't know if I was going to make an iOS puzzle game, or if I was going to make a 3D thing, or so I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to make a 3D thing, I'm going to use this thing that lets me just kind of throw in a car that drives, and has, rendering and audio and stuff out the box. But then, the problem with things like that is it's very easy to get started. But then once you start trying to customize, it's like you're untangling something that you have no idea, what's gone into it, what's possible. Whereas I prefer rolling my own things because I know exactly what. I know this is a popular thing with nerds. And I think you've got to draw the line in the right place. And part of it's that, if you just learn how the game engine works, then you will know what you can do. And then that's good too. But anyway, whatever. Tried the game jam, failed. But I guess I learned something, and I think I'm going to try another one. I'll try another one next year. Maybe I'll try and find some people to work with next time. It seemed like lots of people. They had got like over 1,000 entries to this thing. So yeah, tried that.
That sounds like a really fun thing to do. And the whole coming up with... I've been at a workshop once where you learn different techniques to help people produce ideas and excluding a key part of something. Like the idea of having a genre game without one of its mechanics. I think it's an Edward de Bono idea generating technique, which ends up in some quite fun stuff, like having a restaurant without a kitchen, or having an airplane without seats or something. And then you can come up with some quite interesting things if you take out one of the critical components of something or characteristics. You like to keep busy, Michael.
Oh God, it's exhausting. Well, let's go back to the pre-recorded last week's episode now and continue with the debate as it started last week and interrupt with completely different energy levels. It's going to be awesome.
Yes.
Let me just whiz through some notes. Okay, so there was a debate on Channel 4, and Channel 4, as it was going on, they were kind of throwing up fact checks on things people were saying. So if someone said something false, like this isn't true, they put a thing up. But then nobody believed it. They just heard what they wanted to hear. So even if you do put that information in front of people, they still have this thing that it's the voice of the media, the mainstream central media, that it sort of makes people hear what they want to hear was a thing here. Another point was it's societal. All these problems are societal, not legislative. So the fact that people, I don't know, on one angle, the fact that people can be anonymous and kind of throw shit into the world, I don't know if that's I think that's a technological problem. But there was a lot of talk of legislating, fining. How do you set up laws? How do you punish people for doing bad things? But that's a game that you're never going to win.
No.
And it's sort of like a social problem if it's so much easier to be a bad person in society than a good person. And I did want to say this for the end, but something that Orit Kopil said at the end of the debate, the Wiki Tribune person, she said, right, we're talking about all the trolling, we're talking about all the terrible stuff that happens on the internet, but most of what happens on the internet is positive, is really nice, is people help. And you sort of heard the room gasp. They were like, what? Ooh. And I was like, oh. And she was like, yeah, people give their time, they give their energy to other people that they're never going to meet all the time, all day long on the internet. Yeah. Like 90% of what happens online is kind of amazing and makes you feel warm. And there's obviously something wrong if people's innate goodness is getting sort of almost like poisoned by stuff that's going on. And this isn't really her speaking anymore, but if instead of trying to figure out more ways of punishing people, I do think if you leave people to their own devices, they will kind of get up to mischief, obviously, and they will do bad things, and you have to have laws. But the way to foster change is not by creating more rules that people find ways around. It's by kind of changing the culture, by changing how people see things, by sort of promoting values, by, kind of having stuff that leans on people's positive qualities instead of trying to punish them for their negative qualities.
Now you say it, of course, there's all these open source projects, there's all these, charity, people crowdfunding things, crowdsourcing stuff, doing loads of things. This all happens thanks to the internet.
Yeah.
Is people clubbing together and doing something positive.
Yeah.
I think the village has got much bigger. I think the offline community, if it is a societal problem, it may have a lot to do with this sort of urban, industrialised ways of living, where you're just not living in a group anymore, where people know each other. Where, if I go to the park here and the young teenagers are hanging out in the kids' park and they drop some rubbish on the floor, I can, without any reservations, go, excuse me, please, could you pick this paper up before you leave the park? And they will. I won't get any gobbiness. I am a grown-up who, is in their presence. But this is a very small village. Yeah. people, they don't know if I do or don't know their mum.
Yeah.
There's a bit of sort of, oh, I better behave myself. So, without anyone being fined or there being any punishment, there is this sort of mutual looking after, respect. I don't know.
We are human instincts. We have quite a lot of human instincts that are based around like having a positive society, and we're kind of, the online world has become bigger than the offline world, and people are fracturing into their own different sorts of groups where there's no punishment for transgressions in the way that that there would be in a village, but also there's, I don't know, like, but it's like you said, like when a child is confronted with the results of doing something that hurts someone else, they start crying because it makes them feel bad. Whereas if you don't ever see the bad result, you just kind of throw something off, you don't learn that empathy.
Yeah, that's true. When you go online, most of the time people are being brought together because they're finding some sort of affinity, where actually in an offline community, it's like in a village, in a street, there's a mix of people.
Yeah.
They're very rarely as like you as, I don't know, some forum on something you're really into. And it's that sort of, that's probably the worst societal impact.
Having to deal with people that are different from you, we sort of don't really as much anymore. But then when we do, it's really bad. And this was something I was excited about, in the 90s, the early it's like, you could have these really specific things getting amplified. It'd be really exciting, like music scenes, and you can find your people. But now it's, people have found their people. Bad people have found their people as well. People have found all sorts of other people like them, and then also like less and less having to kind of talk to anyone else. It's getting messed up. But that's we're just learning, aren't we?
So when you do, I'm thinking about the open source communities, and largely the thing that happened. My experience of working on Ubuntu was such that when I had to deal with a lot of people online, there's a lot of times when I felt offended, upset, whatever, or people would write things. Then you'd meet them face to face, and actually, some of them had as difficulty communicating offline as they did online, but you could find that there was a humanity to it.
Yeah.
That then, when you took it back online, was much easier because you had actually looked at each other in the eye and had a conversation, and therefore, and there's this kind of like the narrowness of the communication that happens online also isn't conducive to proper human interaction. Yeah. Instead of getting the full experience of seeing somebody's body language or how upset they are, like the lady who wouldn't give me her name the other day. Yeah. She was not doing it in an officious way. She did it gently. She even sort of patted my hand and went, I'm here. And sort of, I'm not telling you my name because I'm rude or because it's just that I can't. So I didn't feel upset. I thought it was very odd.
Right, yeah.
But do you know what I mean? But there's sort of extra bits of the communication.
And as you can put it as bandwidth, like there's the bandwidth of our communication is like when it's a few words, it's like there's so much that comes from someone's physical presence that is not being replicated. I think like the rise in popularity of video-based stuff, where you can see more and more of the sort of micro details of how people are reacting, but then still that's going to be very, you're going to show what you want to show. But like we're just trying to like increase the bandwidth. But then the fact that you've always got that choice of how wide or narrow you want to make that gate, and it seems like your incel communities tend to favour a narrow gate, right? They tend to favour a forum where they can just type stuff. I suppose there are YouTube channels. I haven't seen any footage. I watched a long video on incels, another ContraPoints video. She kind of covered it all, but there wasn't really any video footage. It was all kind of from forums. So I guess.
What's incel?
The involuntary celibate. They were talking about it on Guilty Feminist the other week as well. This is kind of like turning not getting to have sex with anyone into an identity. And kind of like it gets pretty, with all the sorts of misogynist language you'd expect, and sort of suicides, and it's and sort of weird entitlement, and weird, but that's another conversation. I almost think I kind of want to talk about it a bit more because it's, but not necessarily on today. But I'm just saying, like, as an example of a very specific community of people, I think like the funnel of the bandwidth that you, almost like maybe the worse you want to be, the narrower bandwidth you choose, because if you did try and have that same conversation with someone you were face to face with, that would just be impossible. So Carl Miller, who's like a tech analysis, social media person at Demos, or in Demos, I don't know. Anyway, this guy, he made a few points about basically this is war. It's warfare that we're talking about now. Like wars are being fought on this information level now more than anywhere else. So we need to kind of treat it like that and step up because we're kind of like very vulnerable to it. And talking about influence operations, fake news, Russia, China, they like 400 million social media posts a year. Propaganda type fake news things are made in Russia and China. Techniques will go well beyond trying to impersonate a news site. It benefits autocratic regimes over democratic regimes.
Well,
if you just kind of like, if an autocracy is willing to just make up propaganda in a way that a democracy just wouldn't do. So there is a asymmetry there in who's going to win this battle.
Yeah, we talked about, you have to be prepared to act like your enemy, to anticipate you. You can't imagine doing it, therefore you can't imagine how to protect yourself from it.
And this is but this is a theme in like why the alt-right seems to be winning in a lot of things, because a liberal argument is at a disadvantage to the sorts of alt-right arguments that you get, which aren't done in good faith, which aren't around listening or growing. So they just automatically have this advantage, and it's the same apparently with the sort of fake news propaganda type engines. Technologists don't want to debate, they just want to build things. They just want to make a thing. They don't want to talk about it, they just try a thing and just make a new thing. So Facebook exists, but the people don't really want to kind of. I saw some footage on Facebook video of Mark Zuckerberg responding to questions from like senators and stuff, and it was like so could someone do this? I was like, well, just having to try and answer people that just are so far from having any understanding that it's just like, what? Yes, but we wouldn't. But things like that. But we need a way of making rules quicker, which I can agree more with. People distrust papers because 3 large companies own them all. It's kind of fair enough, right? So they are looking for alternative news sources. Makes sense. Like, it has become this monopoly, and it is being abused. And that people aren't wrong to distrust the media, but the alternative to distrusting the media isn't just believe everything that comes out of Trump's mouth, which some people seem to have made that mistake. Just go with us. Just go with what we're saying. Sound right? I
think thinking about it more deeply has made me quite depressed.
Well, it's this podcast.
The thing about the fake news element and the way it's run, for me, opens up a broader question of if the progressive, liberal thinking people of the planet don't have the mechanism and the means to combat, because we've kind of got 2 futures ahead of us. We've got a future where we all, in my eyes, there's this sort of future where we all club together, decide that we don't need to consume quite as much, and we worry about the planet a bit more, and we sort of protect our future, or we go Mad Max. Okay. And if we keep going fake news, all right, they have shown no indication that they have any concern or awareness of some of the broader concerns of things like the health of the planet. I've not met an alt-right environmentalist.
No, have you met?
Perhaps I haven't looked.
Maybe
I might
you
look
didn't
for
ask
one.
Them.
Maybe.
Yes, maybe there is one.
Whether they recycle.
but here's the thing, though. It's swings and roundabouts. It's going to be like, you just look at any it just makes me think of game theory simulations.
Yeah.
You just change the rules and you see suddenly people, prisoner dilemma, game theory type stuff. You change the rules, you change the behaviours. Suddenly, kind of like the bad people start to grow, but then the other people behaving in a different way will then have an opportunity to sort of do a cooperative thing, and it will kind of ebb and flow. And it's we had Obama for US had Obama for 8 years, and it was it was an optimistic time, but now we got some years of a psycho.
I do think that weirdly the positive of Trump and Brexit are that the liberal progressives, however left or right they are, need to hopefully have had enough of a wake up to go, do you know what, if you relax too much, shit like this happens. So you can't just sit around and enjoy progress. Go, hey, America got a black president. Our work is done.
We need to, people realising we need to raise our game, basically, because there's stuff that you couldn't anticipate.
I'm glad I said that I was feeling depressed because now I feel a bit better. I'm reminded that
there you go.
what keeps me optimistic.
Here's the last question they asked was, how do we ensure the digital future is democratic? Which I thought, I don't know what I think about that as a question, but fine. But in terms of sort of fixing fake news or, I don't know, improving things. So Tulip Siddiq said, give local newspapers charitable status so that they're not sort of on this kind of trying to, make money grindstone in the same way, so that they're not, because she was like, a lot of the kind of a lot of really good information comes from local newspapers. I don't know about that.
How does that help?
I'm trying to give the idea justice now rather than just saying.
What was the question?
How do we ensure the digital future is democratic? And her answer was, I don't know. Just take.
I'll give you the answer.
Capitalist
I'll tell you
pressure.
What the answer is.
Well, you do. You can do yours at the end. Let me give you theirs, and we can both try and answer it. Right.
Okay.
Lee Rowley said, do something about anonymity and transparency online. He was the Tory guy. My kind of first reaction to that was like, well, that's what Zuckerberg tried. That's what Mark Zuckerberg, that's what Facebook was supposed to be. He was like, he's always been very anti-anonymity online. And just, it's been kind of a shock to me that people will openly, under their real names, be racist now. Right. So Lee's, he's a little bit behind because, frankly, that's kind of one of the founding principles of Facebook is like not being able to hide behind some, username. If you try and sign up with a fake account, see how far you get without being able to sort of provide some information. Say Akiwowo, founder of Glitch UK, she had a couple of points. She had this idea that like millions of people still lack access to this technology, and I'm like, I don't buy into that. So, but you're nodding vigorously. So
that was my art. It's like in Brighton, 16% of adults are still digitally excluded. And digitally excluded means either no access to the internet, no access to a device that can connect to the internet, no email address, no ability to log on. There are a number of them who have no desire, who are sort of refusers. But the national average in Britain is 10% of the population are what is termed as digitally excluded. That is a lot of people.
Well, this is, something I have no exposure to, so maybe it's something to bring up at a later date.
That's why I was trying to go, when you said the newspapers, I was like, hang on a minute. You've got the people that buy the local newspaper as a paper, because they don't go online, and then you've got the people that access it online. They're having a totally different experience of their local newspaper, never mind anything else.
She said data campaigns, I thought was a good one, like a sort of don't drink and drive type thing, but for, data awareness. We're seeing the Facebook bus ads, but, I think you need people to be more aware of those sorts of crimes and know how to kind of spot things. That can be something government can do. Orit Kopel, Wiki Tribune person, said most online activity is positive. It's not all trolling and bullying, and just sort of to leverage people's positive qualities. I think if we can find ways of doing that, to me, that's the only hope we have here. Like, you can't just punish and punish. You need to, incentivize. Royal College of Algorithmists, Hippocratic oath for technologists. So that was what
we've discussed that, haven't we?
Yeah. What do you reckon the answer is?
Well, I think there's still a so the digital inclusion thing is a thing. Or, making sure everyone is digitally included is your first step towards democracy. I mean, having worked at some pretty high-profile political, I worked at the Labour Party. There are members married to each other who share a email address. That's a problem.
Okay.
When it comes to identifying yourself online, for example, it is not unknown in fact, it's not just an age thing, and it's not particular to any party, but there are married couples who share email addresses, which makes it quite tricky to identify yourself online, or one person does all the onlining.
Yeah.
People talk about teaching people how to code, and you and I have had this conversation in the context of, being in a position, this was 2 or 3 years ago we've talked about it, which is being in a position to not be duped.
Yeah,
sort of for it, but I'm not sure learning how to code is necessarily the way to do that. But technical and digital literacy are important.
Well, yeah,
There's
education, the word cloud for the answer to this question, the biggest one was education.
Education, totally. I mean, we've had the Green Cross Code for years of how to safely navigate the streets. There needs to be a Green Cross Code type thing for how to navigate technology.
Well, there needs to be a living set of codes that adapt in real time to the changing environments of the world. So it's not really something that you just kind of learn once.
I wonder how the Green Cross Code would translate those, sort of like the look both ways, listen.
Yeah, maybe it can just be more of a value level thing than a kind of specifics. The only thing about the digital exclusion line is, in terms of fake news, is to me, it's just like, well, that's just more people to be duped by the fake news coming online, isn't it? I don't know how that kind of really relates to solving the fake news problem.
For me, that's an indicator, the fact that those people exist at still such a high percentage, national average being 10% of the adult population, that's a lot. That means that there's probably, if you see them as a sort of tip of the iceberg of digital exclusion, there's layers under them that kind of are online but don't really know where they are or what they're doing. So you think just like not knowing
what's going on is, something we need to educate people. It's got to be part of it.
Yeah. Understanding the difference between a leaflet and a newspaper. Again, offline analogies, but I've always chuckled about the fact that most people outside of the technology bubble don't refer to Firefox or Chrome. They click on the internet.
Yeah. Well, I loved how my grandma used to click on the Internet Explorer icon and call it Google. I'm just going to go on Google. And it's like, Microsoft would hate that.
But it's those kind of exactly those things.
Yeah. So, I mean, literacy and awareness, it's, I guess, the thick end of the wedge, the iceberg of people that are actually casting their votes based on misinformation, false information is, they're the ones that just, need to kind of understand what's going on a bit more. And it kind of my thoughts on this. Personally, I think in terms of fake news, the thing to address would be, I think if people could see why they were targeted with a specific piece of content, if it showed them, oh, well, because you're this because you're this age, you're in this area, and you performed this on this psychometric profile, you are being shown this, I think that would take the air out of it pretty quickly. To me, the reason it was so effective, these campaigns that have kind of put us where we are, were because people just didn't realise how much was behind that random bit of content that they just, strolling through and they're seeing stuff, they're just not realising that there is someone that knows a lot more than they realise, and people get very defensive about that. And if people could see, oh, what? I think straight away they would massively distrust that content. So, but I think in terms of fake news, in terms of, making things generally more democratic, is part of the problem that we've reached a point where we're so democratic that a lot of the ways we used to be protected from ourselves are now not protecting us anymore. How can you democratically impose values? How can you democratically, without it just being pure game theory of here are some behaviours and they happen to work or they don't work, how like this is a symptom of an increasingly democratic system, isn't it? Otherwise, you
Well-
just, people would just kind of like manipulate things and get away with it, and we just, things would be how they've always been.
Over the course of this podcast recording, not today, but I mean over the course of the year, I have begun to consider the idea that where there is this new post-political, post-democratic sort of phase that we need to enter into, where you have more engaged democracy, not less. Like technology enables far more micro level decision making, nuanced inclusion. But in order to do that effectively, we need to know what buttons we're getting. That like button, or the thumb up, thumb down, or whatever the sort of because technology enables that.
Exactly. Like,
all
so that
bar
we need
10%.
to put some of this technology back into. But I think, like, even televising the House of Commons is made it. I think, like, get rid of this fake debate would be nice as well. Get these old systems, institutions, old ways of doing things they're kind of transparently obsolete, and I think people can see that. And I think that's the voting problem. It's like, well, no one's listening to anyone. No one cares about the actual what happens. They just care about themselves. Politics is politics, like political behaviour. What's that got to do with infrastructure and setting up, getting roads built? Why is that a political thing? Why is healthcare a political thing? Why is education a political thing at any level? Like, it shouldn't be, should it? And post-political world is something I would very much like to see. And I think like transparency and inventing new technology is the way towards that. But then, the new thing will always, new things appear and they will favour a certain, they'll create their own bubbles, they'll create their own sort of like spikes of, behaviour. But that's just how it is. And there'll be problems with the new things, like there were problems with the old things, but at least we're iterating faster. But, let's try and iterate fast enough that we don't, eventually we're going to iterate ourselves out of existence, if you believe Elon Musk, or, a lot of these people that are warning about the burgeoning AI apocalypse. Sort of so many people are trying to place their faith in, like, so many people's answers to that question on the thing were like, well, probably AI, probably augmented. Like, everyone's like, wants to put that, probably a blockchain thing will fix it. It's like people just want to put their faith in whatever the newest sounding technology is. Not really, this is going to be very mundane soon, and it's not a silver bullet. Nothing is a magic silver bullet. It's like, it's not going to be the new thing that fixes it. It's going to be the thing that we've got the hang of now that fixes it. And we're still getting the hang of all this technology. We're still getting the hang of like the ebbs and flows, the effects, the causes and effects, the resonances that come out of this stuff existing now. Yeah.
Like, what would it look like if the subject of you being able to see the profile that somebody has on you? I mean, you can apply to see your credit score. So, maybe we make it more formal that you have an advertiser's profile.
Well, the thing is, like, this is a platform level thing, and I don't know if Facebook are going to need to be forced by governments to institute something like that, because it's not really in their interest. Like, advertising is just going to be less effective if people can see how they've been targeted.
But have you seen that there's a card come out called Anna or something like that? Anna rings a bell, but it's basically stops you from buying things from blacklisted companies. So companies who don't treat their employees well, and who, whatever, I can't remember the criteria, it's particularly about employees stuck in my head. But basically, if you try and spend money with this card from a company that doesn't meet certain standards, then it stops you. I mean, I've got no problem with pre-selecting myself to say there are certain things I don't want to do. Yeah. Please help me not do them. But that, there's a trust. I need to declare myself to be interested in certain things, and then trust companies to adhere to. And maybe advertising is no longer the business model, that all of these things just totally rely on advertising business models.
Yeah, and maybe we should just pay for Facebook, and we wouldn't, like, if everyone just paid £2 a year for Facebook, we wouldn't have this problem.
No. And I think that's part of the problem. It's like we all want stuff for free, that we don't really need. Anyway.
We want stuff for free, but we don't realize that we're the product. Everyone, if something's free, you're the product. If you didn't know that already, I really hope you do by now. But that's just, remember that. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe you want to hear more stuff like this. I'm sure you do. But anyway, if you like the podcast, come to grandpodcast.com. And where can people find you, Ivanka?
People can find me at Ivanka on Twitter.
You can find me at michaelforestmusic.com. And what can people do to help?
It'd be really nice if people would share links to grandpodcast.com or iTunes or whatever you listen to podcast on. Write us some reviews. A few 5 stars are always very welcome. If you can't find us on something, then let us know. We'll make sure we join in with that platform too. But yes, tell your friends.
Why should anyone help us?
I don't know.
Why are we doing this? Because we went to Meaning conference and we were like, oh God, this is all so intense and I never want to think about this. Let's make ourselves think about this every week, because otherwise you get Trumps and you get Brexits. So why should you share this? Because let's think about this stuff all year round, people, everyone, you and your mother and your brother and your other mother, right? Just everyone. Like if we just go to where the kind of quick endorphin burst is every time, then we're going to find ourselves in a post-Brexit Mad Max apocalypse.
Fact
news.
As Lily on Peter Rabbit says, and I know that for a fact.
Bye.
Bye.